welcome back to Epicenter Garage. Today is going to be a noisy day, but first we need to put this sign up. So as you guys know, I love automobilia, memorabilia, something like that. Anyway, whatever it is, I love signs. I love anything to do with cars or anything to do with engines, whatnot. And so as you guys will see even in future episodes, I love making signs. Now this is not a real 24-hour Le Mans sign. I made this one. I did the letters in CAD, laser cut them out, did Le Mans, and tried to make it kind of look old school, kind of dirty. It's got chips up the front. So I made this sign just because I love signs. And so now that it's done, it is time to put it up on the wall, which you guys are going to see in future episodes, me putting a lot of signs up and making various kinds of signs. So what we've got to do is we're going to put this up, and then we are going to drive that today. So let me go ahead and get this hung up, and then we're going to go talk about the Cortina. Now, it's a lot smaller now than I'm down here. When you're up there, it's... We're literally going to be filling this building up. I'm getting close to losing my wall space in here. I've got there's some good space up there. But out in the other area, oh, you guys just wait. I've got some that are just gonna blow your guys' mind, hopefully anyway. All right, guys, if you're like me, you get online, you're searching for a car, and you see a really cool car, and for some reason it just tugs at you. But then you immediately think, you start looking at it, you start doing some research, you start pulling up all the pictures, you're like, man, I really like this car, but you know what? If I had this car, I would do this, I would change this, I would modify that. And pretty soon you get these grandiose ideas in your head, and pretty soon the car that you're buying, or now you really want to buy it simply to fulfill the plans that you've concocted in your head. Well, for me, that was this car right here, my 1966 Ford Cortina. Now, when I say, concocted and had grandiose plans, that's what I had for this car. I fell in love with this car. Of course, you guys know, I love Fords. I love fast Fords. I love cars that are a little bit quirky. And this car, checks all those boxes for me, even more so than I initially thought. So much so that when I got this car and I drove it and started having, oh man, when I say drive, I'm talking driving it all the stinking time. And I quickly fell in love exactly the way it is. And I didn't want to change anything, even to the extreme that I have never washed this car. I'm dead serious. I've had this car for, oh my gosh, well over 10 years. And I've never washed it, partly probably because it does have some surface rust. I'm afraid if I washed it, it might disappear in a few years right in front of my own eyes. But it's almost like one of those cars where the dirtier it gets, the cooler it becomes. And that's exactly this car. I mean, you can see the 13-inch wheels on the front, brake dust all over. Who cares? I mean, it's got scrapes and scratches all over the hood. You can touch it, you can rub it down. I don't care. It quickly became, as you guys know, I love all the cars that I own. And within that little segment of all the cars you like, there's different categories. Well, I love a Lamborghini Countach because of this, and I really enjoy this car. I'm passionate about this car because of this or that. This car has its complete own category. It is nothing special to look at for probably the normal person. This can go by the road. Now, I'm going to tell you, people notice this car not necessarily for the way it looks, but the way that it sounds, because there is something special under the hood. And because this car plays that role. You guys have heard the term, a wolf in sheep's clothing. This is more like a lamb and with a lion's heart. That's pretty much what this is. It doesn't look very special at all. It's ratty. The trim is kind of going to pot. The back end on this car, it looks like, a little old lady's glasses, these taillights. It looks like some, 90-year-old woman would drive this. It almost looks like a car you might see on, like, driving through Mayberry or something like that, until you hear it and you understand exactly what this car could do. Oh my gosh, you guys, this thing will put the hammer. When you get in this car and you ride this car, people just are flabbergasted by how fast it is. Okay, for those of you that aren't up to speed on Ford cars from the 60s era, and when I say even from the 60s era, basically Ford cars that were never brought into the United States. Here we go. This is one of those cars. So this is a Ford Cortina. I believe they came out in, in the early 60s, 64, 65. And they were basically, think of them like as your Honda Civic of the day. They were just an econo box. They were very, very inexpensive cars, probably one of the least expensive, passenger cars you could buy in Europe. They had a little tiny engine in them, a little inline four-cylinder engine in them. Not very fast, obviously with a very small motor, well under 100 horsepower. They were not the fastest thing in the world. But on tight European roads, oh man, these were absolutely incredible cars. And then the ante got jumped way up when Ford and Lotus got together. And then, of course, the famous Jim Clark started racing these cars, and you have what's called the Ford Lotus Cortina. And that changed the game. That put this car, and in my own feeling, even Ford in the 60s, before the GT40s, before all that stuff, really put them on the map, because all of a sudden you had a twin cam Lotus engine in this thing putting out, it was over 100 horsepower, and don't quote me, I want to say maybe 115, 116 horsepower in this car, and Ford wanted to go racing, which is exactly what they did. They wanted to go saloon, is what these cars were called, the racing series, saloon racing in general in Europe, and these things tore up the track. And the combination of these cars with Lotus, with the handling, and of course with the talented Jim Clark, they won the championship. This is not, nor did it start out as an original Lotus Cortina, because obviously when they were building Cortinas, then they started doing runs of original Cortinas or with the Lotus motor and various other little changes they did to these cars. Those cars now are stupid expensive. I want to say you could buy them at one time for $30,000, $40,000. Now they're easily, you'll see them for $70,000, $80,000, $100,000, well over $100,000. And one of the reasons why is, number one, they just didn't, back in the day, it's kind of like, like my Honda Civic SI, 86. They kind of rusted away. People really, you're on to the next car, and they were no longer special because they were faster, I don't want to say better cars, but certainly faster, maybe better built, more modern cars. And so it kind of got left behind, but the ones that are still here, the original Lotus Cortinas, look those up on Google or look them up on YouTube. Those are fantastic. And the sound that those things make, and if you ever get a chance to go to a vintage race, you're going to see a Cortina, probably an original style or original Lotus, Ford Lotus Cortina racing at the track. Now this one is no Lotus Cortina. It is strictly a Cortina with the, the Lotus, what they did. And you can see here, it is literally written, and they didn't even use a stencil on this. It says Team Lotus. I might have even been able to do a better job than that, and I'm not that great. It almost looks like, a 10-year-old came in and put Team Lotus on the side. And that was something I was going to change. I'm like, oh, man, I need to go through and restore this car. But I've had this car for so long, and I love it the way it is. It is ratty. It doesn't look all that special, but under the skin and what this car can do absolutely sets it apart from any other car in my collection. As you can see here, the old green paint comes all the way back, kind of goes into a hockey stick. And where have we seen that on other Fords? Maybe the Boss 302, things like that. Has the Lotus badge right here. Now, purists out there, if you're watching from the UK or anywhere, and you're probably like, oh man, take that off, and I'm kind of in that field as well where, I was going to change this car around because things like that, I was like, you know what, I probably just need to paint it all eggshell white and restore it because it has I'm telling you guys, the paint, if you guys really saw this up close, it's not good. The car really doesn't have very much rust at all on it, but, I think You know, this is a step below a Mako paint job, but I love it. I will never, never, ever change this car. Now, when I bought this car, granted, I mean, obviously I saw pictures of the trunk, but I didn't really ask too many questions, you know, like, hey, why does it have 2 fuel cells? Or, well, actually, this is a fuel cell. This is kind of something it is a fuel cell, but this one's aluminum and this one's plastic. And I thought, why the heck does it have 2 fuel cells in it? This is a 10-gallon and this is a 15-gallon tank. But after driving it and filling up both tanks, or actually just filling up the main race tank and running out of gas in well less than 100 miles, I quickly realized why the heck there are 2 tanks in here. Your auxiliary. It even has a pump, a fuel filter, and its own pump to pump fuel from this extra tank back down into the race tank. And trust me, you need this tank. Actually, it could probably use even more tank because the miles per gallon on this thing is absolutely pitiful. I know it doesn't look like much, but oh my gosh, you guys, this engine. So what we basically have here is a 331. So a stroked V8, 331 cubic inch, full-on headers, Holley 750. It's got a Ford racing cam, roller rocker cam, roller rocker arms, you name it. It has it. It's extremely dirty, but this thing will flat haul the mail. It's backed up by a T5 transmission. The gears in it, it's got 355 gears. It's got an 8-inch rear end in it. And in that rear end, it's got a true track limited slip differential. And I would say when I first bought this car, I drove it, and it was fast. Don't get me wrong. Ton of torque. Didn't really like to rev, like a lot of stroked V8 engines. They don't like to rev too high. But the amount of torque was insane. It was obviously this motor, a stroke motor. You build them for torque. But this car weighs approximately. I put it on the scales, and it was right around 2,000 pounds. But man, once I rebuilt the carburetor and went through and cleaned things up and went through and did the headers a little bit better, did the exhaust a little bit better, this thing just flat will set you back in the seat. So much so that you guys, that I've roll raced this car, and you're gonna see this later in future episodes, this car roll racing other cars in my collection. I pitted this up against from about 40 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour against my 2000 Cobra R, my Viper GTS, oh man, several of my Ferraris, which it wasn't even close. But this thing pulled, and my Cobra R is modified, so it's putting out 400 horsepower at the crank, maybe 410. This thing just left it, absolutely left it. Now, as far as horsepower in this engine, I have no clue, which is the reason why I wanted to roll race. I'm like, dang, this thing is stupid fast. And so roll racing gives me a pretty good idea. So this thing has to be pushing at least 400 horsepower, maybe 380. Nah, it's got to be 400 because in order to walk that Cobra R and my Viper that puts out 450, 460 horsepower, obviously gearing will come into play. There's a 5-speed versus 6 speeds, but we rolled in multiple different gears, and right off the bat, this thing would just jump ahead, and it was bye-bye, baby. There was just nothing left. Those other cars couldn't even catch it. And did I mention that this thing runs on 13-inch wheels? So a combination of fairly low gearing, a stroked motor, running 13-inch wheels on Toyo Proxy super sticky, basically track-a-day tires. The combination, of course, with a true track limited slip differential. It will put the power down, but it will also do magnificent burnouts. The funny thing is that it doesn't make a lot of noise when you're smoking the tires off, but you look behind you, all you see are these black marks, and it's just dead straight. It's not one of those cars that gets off to the side and kind of makes you worried a little bit. Hey, am I going to put it in a telephone pole? No, it just goes dead straight and just gets to business. It just takes care of business. Now, when I say my Cortina is a little bit kind of rat roddy, it really is. I mean, right here, look at that. Well, that wire is really not going to anything. These lights actually do work, but when you do use them, oh my gosh, look at that. Yeah, rarely do I turn them on because the light in front of my car does this. Even though this car does have Toyo proxies on the car, as well as, running little 13-inch mini light wheels, it does actually have Wilwood front brakes and, of course, rotors. But that still, it doesn't want to stop too good. You think with 13-inch, or not 13-inch wheels, but with Wilwood front brakes on the front, super sticky tires, you'd think it would be pretty confidence-inspiring. But I think the sheer speed of this car, now if this car had the original, 1600cc engine in it, I think this would be great. 13-inch wheels, small Wilwood rotors on the front, or Wilwood brakes on the front. But certainly there's more weight on the front of this car than there was originally. And this thing is going much faster. I mean, we've literally tripled the horsepower on this car and added some weight. Now, one of the cool things, and when I talk about having weight over the front wheels, one of the super cool things that was done to this car was the firewall was changed. So there is a guru out in, I remember, I think he's out in San Diego, that has converted multiple Cortinas, and he has a very special way that he does this, because he moves the engine way far back where the four-cylinder used to be. They just don't come and plop the engine right where the four-cylinder. No. They take the firewall out and they actually curve it back. It used to, in a Cortina, if you guys ever look at pictures of original Cortinas, the firewall actually comes out like a bubble, almost like a balloon, and the engine kind of sits in front of that. What they've basically done, they cut that balloon out, reversed it, so now you've got this big concave, and they've taken the V8 and they've set it way back. So the weight distribution on this car is actually pretty darn good. The fact that the brakes, and I thought, well, you know what, maybe I'll upgrade, I'll go to a 15-inch wheel or a 16-inch wheel so I can put more brake under this car for track use and stuff, but I just can't. It would just throw the whole character off. Why does it have a Triumph steering wheel on it with a Triumph badge? I wish I could tell you, I don't know. When I bought this car, that was already on there. But I did quickly find out why this steering wheel is so darn big, because this car has, no power steering with small tires on it. You got some weight over the front. This thing is a bear to turn around. It's honestly, the better option is to rev it up, dump the clutch, and whip the back end around than try to do, like an Austin Powers turnaround, because you will be absolutely worn out. And of all the cars in my collection, even my big Army truck, the steering in this is by far the hardest. It is that bad. When I say it's that bad, trust me, it is hideous. But once again, that's what it makes this thing so special and so much fun to drive. Not just anybody can get in this car to drive it. Now, in original Cortinas, the shifter is right around this area right here. That's been covered up. And a T5 transmission has been put in this car with 355 gears. We've got our rally, I can't say rally gauges, but our rally clocks right here. And now all the gauges have been replaced with autometer gauges, so they are not the original gauges, but they look extremely period correct. The way they fit in the pods, just perfect. You've got your fuel, you have your oil, you got your water temperature, you got your voltmeter, and of course your tach and your speedometer. It does have a roll bar with two mounts that go down at an angle. No sound deadening in the top at all. It does still have all the glass, and it does have the door panels on the side, aluminum door panels, roll-up windows, and no air conditioning. But I've taken this car on some good long trips. It motors right on down the road. But even in fifth gear, this car is just, it accelerates like a lot of my cars. In fifth gear, like some of these other cars accelerate in third gear. It is just crazy. Now, up to 100 miles an hour, very confident. It's like, it has that short window. It's like 108, it's all right. 110, you shut this puppy down. It's weird. Now, nothing's out of balance, things like that, but it's just the way the body starts to rattle and the windows and the air moving over the car. Whew, it feels like you're hitting the sound barrier. This is one of those cars where you can shut the door, walk away, and still hear the door closing. Yeah, it's that bad. Now this is what other Cortinas can't really do. Well, there you have it. My 1966 Ford Cortina with a V8, a 331 transplanted under the hood. Now, in future episodes, I plan on roll racing this car against other cars in my collection. So if you've seen previous episodes and seen some cars in the background, be sure to put down in the comments of what cars you want me to roll race this against. Granted, you know, Ford GT, something like that, it may not be such a fair fight. But so if there's cars that you think might be kind of close, or even, you know, this thing can hit above its belt line, please leave a comment below. And once again, really appreciate you guys watching. Been really enjoying putting this channel together, and we'll see you again real soon.